Hello, everyone. I'm just going to give it a couple minutes for people to log in, and then we'll get started.
All right, welcome to the GenAI as a practical tool for transformation and empowerment. My name is Erin Mack. I'm the Chief People Officer at True America, and I am so excited to have this esteemed group here today talking about GenAI. So what I'm going to do to get started is I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves, and then we'll jump right into the questions. So, Steve.
Yeah, so good afternoon, everybody. My name is Steve. I actually work for Genpact. We are a global professional services organization focused on transformation through data tech, AI, and analytics. I lead our talent and learning development team for the transformation side of the business based here in Chicago, Illinois.
Hi, I'm Alice Leclerc, and I'm the head of talent, culture, and performance at Ascendion. Ascendion makes and manages software platforms and products that power growth, lowers risks, improve how works get done, and delivers captivating experiences to consumers and employees. We innovate through digital engineering solutions, and we are a generative enterprise, and so this conversation will be fantastic. In addition to my role, I'm also the go-to-market transformation human capital partner to our Chief Commercial Officer.
Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Carney. I'm the Chief Human Resource Officer for Carter Bank and Trust. We are a community bank, about a $4.3 billion community bank with 700 employees in North Carolina and Virginia. I'm based out of the Greensboro, North Carolina area. I'm a bit of an anomaly. I'm actually a techie by trade who fell into HR. And again, when the web came along back in the 90s, I got excited about that, built companies and sold them on that. And today, with generative AI being on the scene, very excited to talk to everybody on the panel and with everybody in the audience today.
All right. I have a feeling this one is going to be good. So just out there hearing from all of you and what you have to contribute, I am excited to ask the first question. So first question is, have you begun utilizing generative AI in your business? And if so, what use cases have you either established or begun working on?
I can start off with, I'm not shy. So we have several use cases at Genpact, especially within the talent space. First off, we have a homegrown tool called Guru AI, and it's really tied to our learning development platform. So basically, anyone that takes any type of self-paced course on our platform can interact with this generative AI tool to go deeper into the content, connect to other experts in the organization, role play certain things if it's that type of training. That's one use case. We've also released our own enterprise version of generative AI. So behind the firewall, or whatever you want to call it from a security standpoint. Paul, you can correct me if I'm using bad terms, but that allows people to interact with generative AI without the fear of some of the data privacy concerns that are on top of everyone's mind. We're also in the process of implementing what we call a sales assist tool. And so basically it's helping the seller to, basically package everything from value propositions to more understanding of our offerings, external insights to our clients and competitors, and be able to basically create a narrative or a simple action plan on how to, identify a value for the client, how you actually pitch it to that client. And, so that's going to be rolled out in the next month or so. And we're exploring a lot of other solutions in talent, but those are probably the three biggest use cases for us right now.
Cool. Outstanding, Steve. Thank you. Paul and then Alice.
Yeah, so I'm actually, again, an anomaly. I have yet to convince our Chief Information Officer and our CEO to allow us to use generative AI in our bank because banking is such a highly regulated industry. They're a little conservative about us using it internally. So we are cautiously approaching it. Me on my own, though, my team and I, the HR team, we do use what's public. We're a public company, so we do use what's public. So we'll take a job posting and we'll use it in generative AI to do things like come up with LinkedIn postings and things like that. So we've had a lot of use cases where we've taken and created job descriptions and things, but just very cautious in that we don't have that behind the firewall type capabilities. We're looking at it, but it's going to be a bit for us to get that internally. So that's the other challenge, I think. And when I talk to a lot of HR professionals, they're facing that same challenges, especially in smaller mid-sized companies. They're just not focused on it right now. And as we all know, that's going to leave us all behind.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've heard that a lot in the industry. People saying that if you're not currently using AI when you're going against your competitors, you're going to be sauced. And so,
Yep.
so that is tough. A you, Paul. Alice.
Well, Ascendion has been engineering and deploying advanced AI for a few years already. Currently, we have 500 what we refer to as digital ascenders working alongside human beings, which we also refer to as ascenders. This has helped us to realize productivity gains of 60%. And so we are on a pathway of seeing all 6,000 plus of our human ascenders working in partnership with their digital ascender counterpart in order to be fully embedded with advanced generative AI solutions and skills. What we've done internally as well is launched a GenAI powered knowledge bot. And this is a bot called Ada. And every ascender has an opportunity to play a part in helping the system learn more and become more helpful, which for people in the HR space / the people function space, this is a really exciting landscape for us because sooner than later, our ascenders will be able to interact with Ada when it comes to their questions about how many paid holidays do we have? What is our maternity leave policy? Do we have a 401k match? We are on the brink of having a fully integrated opportunity leveraging GenAI to have a partner within the HR space of Ascendion. But not only that, beyond HR, Ada can also help create clear, punchy messages and proposals to your exact point, Erin, about saucing the competition. That's a phrase I'm going to steal and use forever from here on out.
Do it.
But then also in terms of multi-generational appeal, Ada also has the capability to help make our social media posts more engaging and more punchy. This is such a truly exciting opportunity we've taken it even outside of these things I've just described. So our talent acquisition platform, which has a pool of over 6 million candidates, this was our pilot program where we jump-started GenAI integration into our business and how work gets done to our clients. And when we go to market, we have in our product bag what we call Ascendion Ava. And Ava leverages AI, machine learning, and automation to help software engineering teams lower development costs, produce better software, and improve overall quality. And while I know I could go into great lengths about this, and Paul will be right along with me, I'm going to spare everyone the advanced dialogue around this in terms of developer productivity, creating stories from epics, code conversion from one language to another. But you've heard it here. Ascendion Ava is your digital ascender in partnership and in business with you to optimize these effects.
Amazing. You sold me. I'm leaving my job now.
Okay, come here. And
Oh
Paul, for your leader that is not yet bought into GenAI, have him or her call me as well. We need to talk to them together. this is the world that we should all be embracing together.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That sounds just beyond amazing and just outstanding. I think it's also a greater use of our time and competencies. And so if you think about the day-to-day tactical items that can be addressed through ADA or just through AI, and that messaging is consistent and reliable, I think that is great. It even troubleshoots your internal team when you have
That's
to remember to ask, like, what is this again? And then also for other people, like, internally, to be able to ask ADA questions, and you can focus on what really drives organizational performance. That's beyond amazing. All right, so we're off to a great start. Very exciting. So question 2, while most organizations are still in the early stages of AI adoption, there is a growing sense that even those who have established basic use cases are beginning to fall behind. What best practices have you implemented to ensure your teams are keeping a foot on the pedal of innovation and creativity? All right. So we started off with Steve this time. So Paul, would you like to kick this question off?
Sure. So, I'm one of those who says, while it may not be used directly in the organization, although we found out that quite a few people are using generative AI, just not through the corporate networks, which is another concern I've brought up with the CIO, and the CEO is saying it's happening anyway, and we'll work on that. But one of the things I've done is I've realized, especially for HR professionals, but it really expands to everyone else, is I've watched how people use, and I'll just pick on a chat GPT type thing, even though it could be Copilot built into products, whatever it is. It could be the Ava product. I haven't used that one yet, but you watch how people interact with it. Here's what's interesting about generative AI. We as humans have been conversing with each other for millennia, right? But we still have times when we can't communicate well, right? It's just our words, body language, everything. There's times, imagine getting the tone from a text message or an email sometimes. We can't figure that out. Well, now we've thrown a computer in that speaks our language. That's going to present a whole new challenge, because we've all known that when you talk with something like ChatGPT, it's not a human. And in fact, I jokingly say it's like talking to the smartest 7-year-old, because you're going to have to be very specific. It's going to make things up at times. You can tell it how much to make up and not. And that's the thing. So I get down to what I've started to do is help people understand how to craft prompts, because that's really the key to people figuring out how to get the most robust results from a generative AI, no matter where it is, which tool it is if you're just staring at the thing saying, what do you want? Learning how to ask for things in a very specific way is what we're going to have to continue to teach people. So, I created a newsletter on my own just to help people understand how to craft prompts, because that, I think, is the piece that, from a training perspective, we've got to get people up to speed, and HR people have to know it, because we're the ones that don't have to know it just for themselves. We got to know it to guide everybody in the organization. We have a very unique responsibility in HR that we have both of those. No one else in the organization has both those responsibilities. So I think the key to it is really helping people understand how to start talking to computers with our language. Before, you had to hire programmers like me and the folks on Ava's team that would then, the Ava people that are on Alice's team, that would then go through and translate what we wanted to computers and get the computer to talk back. Today, we can now talk to it. That's what's so radically different about this. We can talk to it using our language, but we've got to make sure we understand how to have that conversation.
Outstanding. I think I was, as you were speaking, I was actually like reflecting on myself as well. And I'm thinking to myself how important it is, if you can't get Chat GPT to understand you, how do you expect for your employees to understand you when it comes to just simplifying your communication? And so I think even within this model, I think we're learning ourselves how to, effectively communicate. So really cool.
Yeah, and it's powerful. I do speeches to local SHRM chapters now about talking about this. And last week I did one and got a lot of excitement, anxiety, and mind blown when I started talking about my emotional journey. I actually talk about the fact that one day I got frustrated with ChatGPT because it wasn't doing what I wanted it to, and I almost went off and did it myself because I felt badly that I was haranguing it. But then I stopped and said, wait a minute, it's a computer. Just keep asking it. And I had to figure out ways to ask it. But, you wouldn't do that to a normal person. You wouldn't keep haranguing a person and keep asking them, although a little 7-year-old would, but you don't just keep doing that. But anyways, so yeah, it's an emotional thing. That's the other part too, is that emotional connection we're going to have to change that because it's a computer. It's not a person.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, Alice.
I completely agree with Paul, and since I spoke at length on the first one, I'll cap this off by saying, yes, it is training, and yes, it's conversation. How we've brought that conversation to life in Ascendion in terms of a best practice is to keep it as the question. Our CEO sets the example. When he's curious about what we're focusing on and learning about, his question will inevitably be, how can GenAI be leveraged? How have you been thinking about utilizing GenAI to achieve these things? We had a people leadership team meeting a couple of months ago. One of the items on the agenda was art of the possible, which was a fun imaginative exercise because we want to keep invoking the bright sides of innovation and broadening our thinking. It's not as though the exercise was, okay, all of your budgets are going to be increased by 45%. Therefore, let's talk about Gen AI capability. Absolutely not. It was, let's have, as leaders, business leaders, let's talk about how we can create art of the possible, leveraging Gen AI technology.
Very cool. Very cool. While you were speaking, I was thinking about, I think you just claimed the 2024 mantra, and that would be art of the possible. And so
Yes.
that's outstanding. Thank you, Alice. Steve.
Yeah, I second everything Alice said. To build upon that a little bit, I think there's a few different buckets. One, I think the expectations of your organization on whether and how to adopt generative AI have to be clear, because different organizations are going to be different places based on the industry that they operate in and so forth. And so I think that's clear because you have to have a little bit of a North Star. If the organization is a little bit more conservative, then that has to be very clear. I think the second piece is if you do want to go down the route of adopting generative AI, regardless of how aggressive you want to adopt it, I think you first have to demystify it. And you have to make sure it's relatable. And what I mean by that is a lot of people are going to start to immediately jump to, how does this impact me? And not just how to do my job, but a lot of people are starting to, how's this going to replace me? How's this going to help, make me better and so forth? And so I think the more you drive those conversations, to Alice's point, and help demystify what Gen AI is, and it's no different from any other huge technological advancement, whether it's the internet, whether it's, the size of a PC, whatever it is, like it's going to be something that's going to be here. We're going to have to adapt to it. And humankind went through all those changes, and we're not controlled by robots just yet. I think the third piece is enablement. And so it's kind of a next step of the awareness. And so there is now tons and tons and tons of training on this, whether it's just simple YouTube videos or maybe more, off-the-shelf training through like LinkedIn Learning. Some organizations like Genpact actually, created and curated their own training, and making sure that you help the employee go through that training, because even understanding what a large language model is, understanding that Gen AI needs to be trained, all of this stuff is going to be very important, because it's not just using generative AI. Is the next step is you have to kind of visualize how you can actually take that step level progression on using generative AI. And if you don't understand it, at least in a certain depth, you won't be able to do that. And maybe it'll feel too heavy. The last piece, well, I'll say there's two pieces. One is, if you're going to do it, measure it and hold people accountable. And so there is going to be the early stages of people trying to use it for job descriptions, whatever it is. But start measuring that, and also hold people accountable of hey, in your annual review, what are the 1 or 2 efficiencies that you drove using generative AI? Because if you don't do that, it's not going to send the right message through the organization. Because I think we're past the point of the exploratory stage. And if you're really going to do this, in 2 points, if you're not starting to hit this harder, you're going to be left in dust. And then the final thing is role modeling. And so the leaders in the middle of a Zoom call, they'll just start sharing their screen and start typing in Chat GPT. That is very impactful because it helps people understand that it's okay to use Chat GPT or whatever generative AI to cheat. Like we've all been accustomed, especially in the Western part of the world, that everything's supposed to be independent. It's all supposed to all be our thoughts and our ideas. That's not going to be the case. And then, the final thing is that it's like make sure people don't abandon common sense. So like there's been so many instances where people have just used whatever Chat GPT has created. It may be skewed or it may not be actually accurate. Make sure people understand the value of the human brain is common sense. And don't lose sight of that when you're trying to supplement yourself with any type of technology.
Absolutely. But be careful of those hallucinations from Chat GPT to make sure you're pulling out, information that is irrelevant. Or I think, just when thinking about all of your answers, I think the human element is also, we want information so fast. And I think sometimes we're in awe of how dense ChatGPT provides a very robust answer, but we don't want to read a paragraph and the answer is in one sentence. And so I think we also have to be careful about, how we're customizing our messaging and making sure that we're not over adding information that's not useful, because people will be like, what, this is a true ChatGPT email, dear sir or madam, it's crucial that you, and it's like, I know the answers in one sentence in this 7-sentence paragraph. So very
like
cool.
Mark Twain used to say, I would have written a shorter letter if I had more time, because that's exactly what it is.
Absolutely. All right. So does anyone have anything to add before we go to question number 3? So GenAI is particularly effective as an orchestrator of connected systems, which aligns strongly with contemporary thinking about HR structures. What have you done to leverage AI LLM tools to achieve greater connectivity between HR functions, task, or process? And what have you learned thus far? So I know I said a lot, and so we're going to make sure that we place that question in the chat box before we get started. And Steve, if you would kick us off with this first question.
Yeah, I mean, it's a loaded question. Look, I mean, I think it's when you think about the power of generative AI and the ability to connect multiple data, multiple streams, and be able to synthesize it in a very consumable format. When you think about the tasks or objectives that oftentimes require a lot of those touch points across many different teams or systems, that's where a lot of the opportunity value can be driven. And so one of the areas, and we haven't adopted this at Genpact, but it's one of the things that we're continuing to explore, is this whole idea around talent intelligence. Like to me, when you think about talent planning, oftentimes we rely on ratings, normal systematic data such as start date, promotion dates, that type of stuff. But in a world that's driving to more of a skills first approach to understanding talent, that means the granularity of understanding of talent has to change. At the same time, all of this data exists in some way, some fashion out there, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's on job boards, whether it's on message boards, even like Facebook, stuff like that. And so when you think about talent intelligence, like there are tools out there, and I'm not going to mention these specific names because I'm not getting paid to endorse them yet.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. Always commercially minded over here. So there are tools that will integrate with your HR systems and pull that data in a way that is consumable, and not just pull it in a way, actually infer what skills or experiences you may have, even though you haven't explicitly captured it anywhere, just based on what your profile looks like versus somebody else that could have a similar background experiences. And so this is very powerful from a talent intelligence standpoint. You then have basically an inventory of very deep understanding of your people at your fingertips. Then you start doing, what does this mean from a workforce planning standpoint? What does this mean from a talent planning standpoint? And then how do you actually automate triggers and signals upstream and downstream from talent acquisition to, better understanding, internal talent planning and succession planning? That to me is the future. So what takes literally the entire year for HR to do. Like it's a nonstop process right now. Will literally be done in seconds. And then it's more about, being thoughtful about how you're actually mobilizing your talent and getting ahead of the curve, because now all of the administrative and transactional pieces now are basically integrated. Like I said, this is not the future. This is now. There's several tools in the market that does this right now. Can't say we've adopted it, but we've been talking to a few different players in the space for the last 4 or 5 months.
Very cool. That's a lot. It's such a great answer, because as you're talking, I'm thinking, I don't know if anyone else is thinking about this. As far as where the information is being scrubbed from, especially if it's about you personally. Is it your LinkedIn? Is it your internal resume? Is it your performance review? And so I think a lot of times when we're very comfortable where we are, we may be missing opportunities that will advance us to the next level. So if you have a very skewed reality, based on your past about, being very engrossed in your performance review because you think it's only going to give you 3%, or it's only going to, go this far, this starts to really game change the difference between someone who takes the time but may not be as skilled as you, but because they've written down their skill and it's something that could be sourced, it does become a reality. So that's remarkable, Steve, what you brought up. I think that's really going to resonate with a lot of people.
So, one of the things that Steve kind of hit on this earlier about educating people to understand the systems, what they are. Generative AI, again, one of the powers of it versus the machine learning back in the day when we had to teach it all these different things. You show it pictures of cats and then you show it another picture and say, is this a cat? That was machine learning, which, that's what it was. IBM Watson, teaching it to do chess, that was machine learning. Generative AI, though, takes unstructured data and makes content out of it. That is a very different tactic. So what we're hitting on here is making sure that when we're taking unstructured data from marketing, unstructured data from the business operations, unstructured data from HR, and trying to put something together, where's that coming from? Is it the right set of information? Is it put together? As Steve mentioned before too, training large language models is very difficult. Even if you're lucky enough, like his organization, to put one behind a firewall, which is expensive, because now you got to put it there, you got to hire people who know how to do this. But you got to hire a lot of mathematical people. I was a math major undergrad, so I understand how the statistics work. They turn all of those words into numbers. Everything's a number. And then they look for patterns across these numbers. When you type something, they look for patterns like what you typed. That is amazing to think from a statistical process, but that's why it comes up with stuff. So we've got to understand how those things are. We can try to integrate all of our different functions in different areas, but we've really got to make sure we understand where the data is coming from, how it's being used. Earlier, Aaron, you mentioned the hallucinations. Hallucinations come up because it's statistical sampling and it just does weird things. And we're trying to figure out how to better do that or avoid it. But I don't know that we ever will mathematically, because it's just how it works today. Maybe they'll change the models a bit. But I think the key thing there about watching how we integrate systems and functions is being aware of where that information is coming from and how it's being kind of the transparency of how it's being put together.
Amazing. While you were talking, I was kind of laughing to myself, Paul, because we were talking about the statistical model of everything being a number. I then took it a step further and I said, well, I wonder if your emails can be color coded and conditionally formatted by tone. So before you send it, it's like, this is red. This is yellow. This one is okay to send.
And generative AI will do that type of processing. If you train it to say, look for this tone, do this. Yeah, it's going to tell you, hey, this is your boss. You probably shouldn't talk to him this way.
Right. Is this your last day, question mark? Or do you intend for this to be your
That's
last
right. Oh, by the way, here's a resume site you might need to go to.
Redirect. Oh my goodness.
I need to be implanting my brain. That way I can know where the landmines are before I say things to my
That's
boss.
right. Gives you a little shock.
Yes.
Don't do that.
Or if it just automatically changes your view to green or yellow or red. It's like, before you say anything, this is okay. Oh my goodness. We'd probably almost be perfect. But we'd be boring. So
well, we're humans. We'll mess it up some way.
You're right. Someone would reverse it.
Yeah, right.
Oh my goodness, Alice.
I think the only thing I would add, and I'm going to blame Steve for bringing up the commercial aspect of this, is that when we to the question of how generative AI can create greater connectivity between functions, we have seen our clients, because the world is currently in conversation about Gen AI, our clients come to us to stand up proofs of concept, or to further enhance the things that they have internally started to refine and design. And so in partnership with some of our sales leaders, they have come to us to say, how do we start to put together a very intelligent set of neural networks to process these very complex patterns, so that when we get in front of the client and we demo what the Ascendion way of engineering has put together for them as a solution, please be our advisors, our subject matter experts, because you are best positioned to anticipate what our client is experiencing and looking for their Gen AI solution to help them become more effective at. So absolutely a unifier across many functions, but from a commercial perspective, it's something that we're super excited and really proud of being able to have this type of brand in the conversation now.
Sounds like it. That's amazing, Alice. Thank you for that great input, everyone. That was one of our best questions, I think. Or as far as the input from all of you, but I think we're doing really well. I think this is providing so much expertise for the audience. So before we go to the next question, which is question 4, does anyone have any last minute insights for question 3? No? All right. So question 4. How have your employees responded to the proliferation of AI tools or AI-based interactions? What concerns, if any, do you have with respect to information security, oversight, or ethics? And what practices or guardrails have you established to exert greater control? What are the potential unintended or downstream consequences? This one is good. I feel like we kind of answered this question a bit, just kind of throughout what we've been talking about. So I'm just going to kind of open the floor at this point before, instead of choosing anyone, and just see who has some insights that they'd like to add.
I think there's an old saying, and I hope no one's an attorney on the call, that attorneys ruin everything. I'm saying that in a little bit of tongue in cheek, but look, it's a big concern, and obviously different regions have higher in the U.S. And so it's one of the things I think we're very, very on the early front of this. And I can't remember which band, but they're actually suing, OpenAI because of how the ChatGPT was actually trained and actually incorporating some of its, copyrighted material and so forth. And that's going to be done across the board, in my opinion. So I think we're going to go I think this is going to go through a period of time where it could become much more restrictive, and where the sources of data have to be much more transparent, or at least accredited, just like you would accredit in any type of work that's done. And I think as you think about that in the corporate environment, people have to be mindful of that, because no one's going to be innocent because everyone understands that this is pulling data from somewhere. So you have to be aware of it. And that's where it goes back to, I think, Paul's point about some organizations are going to have more of a wait and see approach until some of this kind of, settles out.
Absolutely.
What I would build directly off of that is this, in terms of how we message around this to our employees. Digital interactions are always stored, to Steve's point, somewhere. And then with generative AI, it is stored somewhere to be redistributed somehow. The other thing that I would say, from an employee perspective, where people have maybe a variety of backgrounds when it comes to the acumen of generative AI, It is to simply say, never underestimate the immensity of a LLM's architecture to understand and generate human-like language. But that is where, and that is exactly where Paul was going when we talk about we are emotionally wired. The model is not. So when we start integrating and embedding more and more generative AI companionship in the workplace, again, I would say we should not underestimate the immensity of what that can have as a ripple effect in terms of our emotional baseline when we're trying to get work done.
Very true. Very true. Again, I'm reflecting again, Alice. You're always bringing it home. My goodness. Oh my
And
goodness.
I had an instance where that happened. Again, I'm learning software development, and I can say it is a great. I actually named my chat GPT Xavier. My wife helped me come up with a name. That is Xaveier. Expert AI value in every response. Xavier. So I don't refer to it as ChatGPT anymore. I say Xavier helped me with, and everyone knows it's ChatGPT. So I do have a connection to it, but I'm careful with the emotional part. But I had a time when I was trying to get it to help me develop some software. It did it. I tried it, had a mistake. I pasted it back in, said, Xavier, this is what it did. And it says, okay, do this. And it was like almost the opposite of what it did the first time. So I come back and said, I asked this, you did this. Why are you giving me something totally different? And it came back with a response, very factual, saying, well, you asked me this, I gave you this, there was an error, But I read it in my head going, it was getting snippy with me. Well, you asked me to do that. But then I had to stop and realize, no, it's not being snippy. It's just being factual. Say, you asked me this, I gave you this, you showed me the error, I improved it. So as to Alice's point, that's going to be hard. And again, I consider myself a pretty highly emotional, intelligent person, but it's going to be difficult. We've got to make sure people understand not to get caught up in this, because two things are going to happen. One is they're either going to be afraid, they're going to hear these stories and be afraid of it completely and not even want to use it. Or if they get burned by that, they're going to run from it and they're going to, nope, I've tried that once, I'm not going to do it again. And then they're going to lose out. So I think that's the downside, that trickle downside is back to our points we're talking about here, is if we've got to better understand it, teach people what this really is and isn't, and then help them understand what it can do and what it can't do. You know, when people say it lies, I have a friend that says it lies. It doesn't lie. It's called generative AI. It is made to generate content. Now you can set the temperature. There's a temperature setting, 0 to 1. You can say 0 and it will not lie anything, or 1 and it's going to make up the biggest story you can imagine. So, you know, you have to understand how to say that, and you can tell it to set the temperature to a certain thing. So those are the things I think are going to be the challenges for all of us in HR. Remember, back to, we're responsible to teach everybody this, plus ourselves, but we've really got to understand that better. And it goes back to understanding and educating.
Outstanding. Outstanding. I think the audience definitely got a kick out of your answer, Paul. I think one of the other things, just when it comes to ethics, that I think most people should be here by now, but obviously, you know, the audience or whomever is, everyone's at a different point of usage. What I tell my employees is, if you wouldn't put it on Twitter, then do not put it in GenAI. Because, so for example, demographic information, even though it may be helpful to sort, my recommendation is, if you're looking for a certain reformatting, I would say tool, why don't you try to ask for the concept in Excel so that it's a resource, and then you do that in Excel versus dropping all of that demographic data or just very personal data into GenAI. And then again, I think like Alice said, it is stored somewhere. And so you have to be careful. So HR has historically struggled to proactively identify capacity or skills gaps and project trends. What role can Gen AI play in achieving more effective and reliable analysis of critical workforce, performance, and market trends? What steps, if any, have you taken towards this possible application, and what best practices have you developed? that question is in the chat box. So I know it was very loaded, but I think it's a great question. I was actually, when I was reading this question, it's actually thinking about you, Wooly, because I was thinking about, you had just finished talking about succession planning, performance, and everything in that space. And I think you'd probably be the best person to start off this question.
Yeah, I mean, so I think the answer I had to that a couple of questions ago, I think touches on this, but if you want to make this more practical, I think that there's some easy use cases, and I do this almost every single day. I mean, and I know people will gravitate kind of the first order things at like a job description, but take a step back as like a talent professional, HR professional, and think about the entire end-to-end cycle of how to like acquire, develop, retain, and potentially exit that talent. And if you think like that, you can actually engage and give specific prompts that helps you do a complete picture. And so, one of the side jobs I have at Genpact is I support our marketing organization from an HR business standpoint. We're going to market for a couple of key executive leadership roles. And, obviously I went there to kind of like get some ideas for a job description to make sure that, I have a different perspective from the internal perspective. But then I went ahead and started actually having it develop basically an evaluation and assessment framework. Like, what are the key competencies? How would you actually measure that? How those would create interview guides? And then, what would be the 90-day onboarding plan for this organization, given it's located here, here are its main stakeholders? And what, again, would take weeks and weeks and weeks to do, took about 20, 30 minutes of prompts. And I had about 80-20 of it. I mean, and then, the other 20% was just me, apply my own common sense, my own understanding. Obviously, there's certain stuff I did not put into Chat GPT. And, it saved me a ton of time. And so when you think about that, then you can actually think about at a macro level, like, hey, what is the ideal profile? What is the actual demand and supply of this type of skill set within a particular market? What would be the value proposition that would be compelling to this type of candidate? You start to get into a point where now you're using a tool to be more strategic, and it's just more about direct execution after the fact.
Absolutely. While you're talking about this exercise, thinking to myself how beneficial Gen AI is when you are kind of like in a space of maybe you're having like a mind blank, or maybe you're not sure exactly where to start, and it's really synthesizing your ability to establish just a framework, a starting point, some level of an outline, just to get you started. Kind of getting back to what Alice said, really put you in a space of making the art of possible. So now you're feeling like, okay, I'm motivated to, just start. I have a starting point. I can see the end. I know what it looks like.
I'm a big believer in what I'll call mental maps of like, hey, think about what would have to be true in order for you to achieve this goal. But hell, with generative AI, you don't have to do that anymore. Like, literally, you could just say, hey, I need to hire somebody. What else do I need to be worried about? From a talent perspective, and it'll be like boom, 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 and then you can start, designing prompts based on that mental map that generative AI laid out.
Amazing. It's like now our brains are conditioned to like be conditionally formatted, like Excel is. If it's not this, then that. Everything is becoming math now, Paul.
Well, and that's the thing. That, remember my point about learning how to talk to it is you're not programming it like I would as a programmer, but you've got to use your language to help it understand. And that's exactly what you guys are saying. It's learning how to talk to it that it'll understand you best. And in that iterative process, I mean, that's exactly what I'm seeing people struggling with, and we'll just have to continue to teach them that.
Absolutely. I really feel like there's so much just within this call. There's so much elevation in our field happening like right now.
People just have to watch it now and be done. That's it.
Yes.
They'll learn.
Absolutely. Alice, did you want to jump in?
I'm going to keep on the theme of talent, because I think that's absolutely the value driver in terms of how we strategically approach this as leaders in the space. Gen AI can provide what I would call expedited direction when it comes to attrition and retention management. And in our space of human capital ROI, we're long overdue to discover new models of attrition and retention management. And because deep learning is advancing us so quickly in terms of how it's revolutionizing classification in building these models, we can now get even better and further incorporating sentiment along with the usual things that we look at: tenure, performance ratings, compensation history, promotion history. And I think an unintended positive outcome in this is teaching the models new things when it comes to anomaly detection, because what it has been trained on and what it has been learning in its unsupervised state may not reflect well enough generational differences or other types of biases or other kinds of information that are simply in a state that's immature. And so this is the good news for HR professionals. GenAI will output what the model generates as what it thinks, but you are still the non-negotiable participant in what the company needs. And we know, 2020 aside, but we know that things shift very dramatically every 2 to 3 years. And we're only now bringing in the partnership of GenAI, which to its credit has been learning from trillions upon trillions of inputs, but still that human day-to-day participation in the culture of the company, the leadership prioritization, the leadership priorities of the company, any pivots that the company has taken, and a human being's ability to meet people where they're at will continue to be that healthy balance / healthy retention, again, in terms of what the model thinks versus what we know that the company needs. So when we talk about the role that GenAI can play in achieving more effective and reliable analysis, absolutely. We no longer have to look at 600 pages worth of, not that I ever looked at 600 pages, but this is a philosophy. We would not have to sit and read 600 pages worth of information to create a hypothesis around retention in the company.
Mm-hmm.
We can have the LLM and the GPT come together with us on that, and then bring our human-based expertise into the design and execution of how we bring that to life in our organization. I do not see the partnership becoming a dichotomy. I really don't, because to Paul's earlier point, what a machine thinks a cat is, and the way that it then takes that model to generate a never before seen image of a cat is well enough. But a human, we have other sensories that bring us to this is a cat. We will get there. The technology will get there. Don't get me wrong. Don't misunderstand. The technology will get there, but it's not there today. And what we're talking about is how this is being amplified in our field today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you dropped so many gems in there. I was trying to write them down. But like I said, I think this call, overall, so far, I feel like every question, the answers are just becoming more intense and just more useful and very much so spot on. I just feel like we're now hearing within answers tools and resources of application, especially we're now being able to put ourselves or our companies within the framework of each of your conversations, each of your solutions. This is amazing. And I think one of the coolest things that I was thinking about is you're right, and it kind of gets into that space of where people believe they can be replaced. The reality of it is that the Gen AI gives you, it could be very pointed to very, I would almost say theoretical, but the practicality of when to use, when to enforce, when to decide how the solution is effective is on you. And so that's where that high level expertise from our field comes in. And so it's nothing to be afraid of, because we're able to really expand our expertise and awareness where people really value that. And so very cool, very cool. So question six is, because of its facility with language and ability to rapidly cross-reference data, generative AI has significant potential for a variety of traditionally manager-led tasks, particularly coaching, feedback, and performance assessment. What potential do you see for this usage in your business? Have you developed a framework or set a standard in this space? And if so, what does this look like? I actually want to give an answer for this one, and then also open it up, just because like this was actually the first way I used AI. What I realized in my company startup, so to speak, when I got here, I've been here for 6 years, company's been in business for 10, and people had never done performance reviews. And when they were, right, like when
I
people
know.
were
When I got
writing
to
them,
Carter 5 years ago, 1,000 employees, they'd never done them. I was like,
never done
okay, we're
them.
going to start doing something.
Yes. And believe it or not, when I said, you know what, because we've never done them at the time, the company was only 37 people before, now we're 100. I was like, can you provide them to me first, just so I can kind of screen them, just to see where you're at from a writing standpoint, you know, and how you communicate with your colleagues, and see if there's this opportunity for coaching. When I read those, I said, okay, if someone got this, they would quit. And so I actually used AI to help facilitate acceptable language in the performance review by taking the core competencies, which is like the job description or the KPIs, what you're focused on, what the person wanted to say, and tell ChatGPT to, you know, provide a response that's, you know, geared, or the trajectory or tone should be X. And it really was able to condition, you know, my workforce to understand how to effectively write, how to use the core competencies against the KPIs, and really start to educate people about what your performance should be like, versus a lot of personal views that are demoralizing, because those aren't, you're not measuring that, you're really measuring performance. So like, what type of language isolates true performance and provides value? So thought that was really cool. So want to open it up to everyone.
I think this is going to be something that's going to transform how we assess and evaluate people. I mean, if you think about the components, it's, you know, setting goals, be able to measure those goals, obtaining feedback on how people are progressing against those goals, whether it's what I often call the swing or the shot, you know, achieving those goals. And then it's like, hey, what are the, you know, capabilities that you have? What are the capabilities that you may need to develop? And here's some, you know, actions that you can take to close that gap. All of that data exists in some way, some fashion, whether it's in emails, whether it's, you know, in conversations on Zoom. Like, all of this now is being captured. And so where this is going to go is, like, the manager will literally hit a button, assuming that they were able to set accurate goals. They're going to be able to hit a button, and it's going to give you, it's going to scrape all the feedback it has. It doesn't have to be labeled as feedback. It's just, you know, whether it's the, you know, there's network analysis, organization network analysis, they'll factor in, like, who you're emailing, how are you collaborating, all that stuff. And it's going to literally spit out, here's like what this person should be rated, here's the feedback, here's the capabilities, here are the gaps, and here's the developmental action plan, and here's kind of this person's next steps, here are the succession plans this person should be listed on. And when you think about that, it's going to completely change what we expect from managers. Because, like, to your point, it's about the empathy, it's about humanizing it, it's about being able to alter that in a way that will land with the individual, but also take into account them as a person. Because everyone has stuff going on outside of work, and you don't want to turn it into this robotic, you know, process. But then again, it also, like, one of the most expensive, and to me, like, Paul, when you say that you want to do performance review, I kind of cringe, because I have a love-hate relationships with performance reviews. to me, it's one of the most non-value add systems that any organization has because no one really does it well. But what this does give an opportunity. It eliminates the waste and it makes it very efficient. And then it's all about who you're hiring as managers. And so it's going to put a big premium on those power skills for managers to make sure that your employees are being treated in a way that will help retain and actually deliver the growth that the machine tells them to do.
That's right, Steve. I think that it gives also the recipient an opportunity to look at how you're being measured. And I think sometimes people may believe that the machine may be more fair than the manager, depending on how they interface with that manager on a day-to-day. And I think that's a tough pill to swallow, but it's also a reflection on us personally on how we interact with our colleagues on a day-to-day. I think we were on a call. The first time you and I met was on a performance call. One of the things I said, I remember you cringing. I was like, I don't believe in performance management because it's not to manage poor performers. Performance management just come to work every day. That means you're doing well. So, oh my goodness.
I don't think I could say it any better than Steve did. I would only bolt on that upskilling managers at scale. I mean, he is absolutely right. AI is the HR leader's best friend in that. Generative AI is able to solve for a great part of what the energy drain on them is, which is help me know how to say this, help me identify whether this is an attitude, aptitude, or somewhere in the middle issue here. And with that prompt engineering, to Paul's earlier point around getting better feedback based on what you are prompting it to respond, this is how our function can at last upskill at scale without having to send people out of the business for 5 days, having them PowerPointed to death that they never look at again until it's time to do performance reviews, and then it's this begrudging, oh yeah, there was that PowerPoint thing. Instead, it's that digital companion that from their prompts is going to help them with their human heart deliver effective feedback and coaching at scale.
Absolutely. I feel like this should have been done probably before somewhere in December, because this is so good. I just feel like I want to tell everyone happy holidays. Like, there are so many gifts and gems in this conversation. This is outstanding discussion. Well, we're getting close, but I do want to ask one more question. It's our last question. And the last question is, what potential value or application do you see with respect to personalized training, goal setting, and learning recommendations that would be tied to your formal career pathing methodology? What might this look like, and what concerns would you have? Again, lots of questions within a question, and it is in the chat box. I'm going to open it up with no particular order.
I think one of the first things, again, the potential is huge. We all know that. The key will be mapping things like potential. How do you structure potential? How would a large language model know what potential looks like? We as humans have a hard time even understanding it. So I think, again, making sure whatever's in that model and how it processes it's going to be key. That human in the loop piece that we keep talking about is so important. One of the things we just talked about before is about capturing all that information where it can suck in emails and chats, maybe even meeting minutes where people interacted in meeting minutes. One of the things I'm going to say is a challenge, though, is that's only one piece of the person. How they interact, we know this return to office thing has swung. I called it a couple of years ago saying it's going to swing right back because people are going to miss that hallway chat, that, hey, let's go grab lunch. And the things you learn about each other at lunch are things that are not captured in a large language model or an electronic system. And that has to be part of it. So we got to just caution our leaders as they look at career paths for people and performance management things, decisions they're going to make around what to do, promote, give them training, what they could potentially be good at, what jobs in the organization, is to make sure we're not just telling them, and I think we've all said this, don't just rely on that stuff that comes out of the system and say, there it is, it's done, because there's so much more to it than that right now. But it is a phenomenal piece that we've lacked for a long time. We've lacked the knowledge, the KM, knowledge management space. I remember being at Boston University with Microsoft and Oracle and all these companies talking about this. This was in the early 2000s. How do you manage KM? These organizations have all this knowledge and systems and all the experts in their head. How do you get it to share? And we still haven't been able to be good at it. But generative AI is actually taking all that unstructured stuff and getting us a lot closer to it. That's the piece I see as so fundamentally powerful. But we still have to keep that human in the loop to say, okay, that's one piece. Let's make sure we don't lose track of the fact that, because as we sanitize, if everybody's using generative AI to come up with how to say things about certain things, every document's going to look the same. You read the marketing people out there in AI, and they're like, everything you see on ads are going to look the same because generative AI is going to say that's what sells people. And that's not going to work. It's going to backfire at some point because it's just not going to happen.
Very good, Paul. Very good. Thank you for that. Outstanding input. Outstanding. Anyone else on question 7? Well, I will tell you that this was a phenomenal interaction. I felt like you all are juggernauts within your space. Your contributions were huge. And I feel like it's really going to move the needle for professionals who have the opportunity to listen in and just hear from each of you. Like I said, there were some true gems within this conversation that are simply phenomenal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up for questions from the audience at this time. All right.